Hi, guys. Welcome to Extra Talk. We have a very special guest today with us. We're going to talk about the finances of Ajax. We are in, how do you call that? In shitty weather, rough weather. How do you call that? How do you translate that? But basically, guys, everybody's expecting a lot of fireworks this transfer window. And so far, not so much happening. And there has been interviews going on with Sven, with Maurice, and things are not looking too good, too optimistic. We're still looking for reinforcements, but we have to sell first. That's the message basically that came across. We know we've always played Champions League. We know we've always had the money. We're the richest club of the Netherlands. We're not playing Champions League this season. So we have a lot of questions for our new guest, who is very well known at Twitter, José. Welcome.
Hi, Juan. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
José, listen, you are the financial guru when it comes to Ajax on Twitter. I always like to exaggerate. Sabi will tell you about it later. But yeah, I always like to exaggerate a little bit. Yeah. No, listen, we're happy to have you. We're going to deep dive a little bit on the finance side. In general, about football clubs, how to look at financials in general. But also specifically to Ajax, because, I mean, all viewers are Ajax fans. We are Ajax fans. So let's see like how things are looking. Is it that bad? I mean, my first question to you would be in a minute when we go to Ajax, how bad is it? Because that's a feeling I'm getting from all the interviews. But maybe you can reassure us a little bit and say, it's okay. It's just a strategy. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, yeah. All right. Maybe a quick spoiler then. I think I'm not that pessimistic, I guess. Yeah, I think they're doing from a financial point of view, they're doing quite well. Last year was wild, but they're just cleaning up a little bit of a mess. I think that's mainly what's going on. So that's positive. That's positive.
All right, so you actually gave the conclusion before we started. That's good.
Yeah,
that's
a good thing. Yeah. It's a good thing.
People can stop watching now. No,
fans can be reassured now.
José, quick question before we start about the financial side of things. How did you become an Ajax fan? Just out of curiosity.
Well, that's actually a funny story in the sense that when I was like 9 or 10 years old, my parents always took me to on holiday to the seaside in the Netherlands, and Ajax was always training at a training camp in the summer at that place, and this was around 94, 95. So you can imagine me as a little guy, a redhead, sitting next to the training pitch with all the big names, you know, from Seedorf and Kluivert to de Boer. Louis van Gaal was trainer, and so I was sold when I saw that, and I can remember one funny thing that there was a rumor that the team was sitting at one of the cafes, one of the bars in the evenings. So we all took our pen and paper and ran to the cafe to get some autographs. Of course, I was there first, and there was Liedmanen. And I thought, oh my God, I need his autograph. So I was small and I was shy, and so I just gave him the pen and paper. I didn't know what to say, and then my pen didn't work. So I was totally flustered, and I didn't know what to do. But he was really nice, and then other people came, of course, and I got the autographs and Louis van Gaal and everyone. So yeah, the perfect time to, as a small kid, to be introduced to Ajax, I guess.
Absolutely. Then you started following after, basically.
Yeah, true.
Who was your favorite? Who was your favorite footballer back then?
Yeah, like I said, Liedmanen was my favorite. Obviously. Yeah.
It's the classic story, right? A lot of people that come on the channel, are, you know, like 90s, Liedmanen. You hear that a lot, to be honest.
But that was a magical time, of course, right? And I mean, after that, it was back in school, and then it was 95 with the World Cup, and listening during class. I don't know, that really sticks, I guess. So,
Sabi, I'm going to give it to you because you're taking over the host, and you're becoming a serious host right now.
Yeah.
So you can go first, man.
Becoming a competitor now, eh?
Yeah, you're becoming good, man. You're good. Go ahead.
No, but just from a general perspective, also for the viewers. When you run from a finance perspective a football club, what kind of key factors, ingredients should we consider? And you can take all the aspects like selling players, evaluation, budget, and so on and so on. Can you tell us something about that?
Yeah, sure. I think it's important, and maybe stating the obvious here, but realize, a football club is a business, is an organization, and for at least a part, they need to make money, right? That's one of the goals. So yeah, that's the reality. That's not the most romantic thing about football, but that's the reality. Luckily, of course, a lot of your success and earnings are dependent on your performance, right, and on your fans. So there's the good side to that as well. Still, it is a very special business to be in as a company. It's hard to make money. I mean, we're seeing a lot of new owners of football clubs and think they can make money, but it's hard to make money with a football club because it's a special business. It's really unpredictable. You're dealing with performance of people, of players, of individuals. So it's hard to control that and to make that predictable and make that make that profitable. So that's something to realize in the beginning, I guess. And then if you really try to put it really basically on what are the incomes and what are the expenditures of football clubs. On the income side, of course, you have to think about things like sponsor deals, TV rights, ticket sales, merchandise, and also European fees from European performances in the UEFA leagues, and of course transfers where you can make money off. And on the other side of the balance, the expenses that you have, mainly salary. Salary is usually very big for a football club to have, and that means players and staff, but also when you're a big business, Ajax has a couple of hundred people working for them, and that's also paychecks for them, of course. And then there are costs for money, just costs of running, costs for matches, costs of running a business, and also costs for transfers on that side as well. And I think if you zoom into the transfers, there's a sort of a special way or specific way, let's put it that way, on how they are presented in the balance sheet, in the yearly numbers that the KNVB, the Dutch Football Association, yeah, thanks. They have rules on how to present your financial numbers every year. In that, for example, the transfers that are incoming, they are treated in a special way. We call that amortization. It's a special word, but what that basically means is that the fee that you pay for a player is spread out over the years of the contract. So let's say you purchase a player for a transfer sum of $15 million. If you give him a 5-year contract, each year of those 5 years on your balance sheet is 3 million euros, because that's 15 divided by 5. So realize that it's different and it's not equal to the transfer sum. So if you see on transfer markets, for example, that Ajax paid 50 million for a player, in this year on the balance sheet it only says 3 million. And if you put all of those amortization values of this year together, of all the active players in your team, in your squad, and the trainers, by the way, if you paid for them as well, then you get a total, and that total is quite a crucial number in the financial performance of a football club. Transfers on the other side, so if you sell players, so also something to note about that. In the numbers, you get a transfer result. So in a transfer result is basically saying what actually is left of that transfer sum that you get from selling a player after all the costs are taken off with it. Those costs are first of all the remaining amortization. So if you sell a player before the end of the contract, you get a number, but there are still some years with amortization left, so those are taken off. Then maybe there is something like a sell-on clause or a clause in there, so that has to be taken off as well. There's a solidarity fee. So every player up until 23, the clubs where they play for, they get a small fraction of that fee after the transfer sum. And then of course there's the other expenses, which is mainly the intermediaries, right? So agents of players, and usually there are more than one agent, and maybe there's some other in between intermediaries in there. So they also take quite a chunk usually. So if you take all of them off the transfer sum, what remains is the transfer result, and that on paper is sort of the incoming value of your of selling a player.
I have a few questions about what you said, José, regarding this specific topic before we go into Ajax. When you said like the Dutch Football Association came with this way of reporting, is it only here, or is it something that you see like also in the UK, for instance, or in Belgium, or is it like UEFA or FIFA even?
Yeah, I think it's even FIFA rules, and the Dutch association has taken that over. But every club you can find, if you look at the numbers, something like amortization, and it represents basically the same as in the Dutch clubs. Yeah.
And when you have a transfer fee, right? What you said, you look at the transfer result. There are so many costs involved, and then you get the transfer result at the end. What goes in the books? The fees or the results?
The result goes in the books.
Okay.
So maybe to give an example, last year when Antony was sold, the transfer sum was 95 million, excluding the bonuses. But then you look at the transfer result, and there's a bit of guesstimation in there, because in the yearly numbers that Ajax publishes, it's only the total of all transfers given, but you can make quite a good estimation about that. So there was some remaining amortization for Antony. That was 9.5 million. There was a sell-on clause in there. That was almost 15 million. There was a solidarity that they had to pay to the clubs where he was when he was young. That was a little more than 3 million. Then you calculate the intermediaries and the other costs, and that's something around 15, maybe even 20%.
Damn.
Wow. So what was the transfer result for us?
Yeah, so like I said, it's a bit of a guesstimation, but it's something like 53, maybe 54 million.
Almost half.
Out of 95, we kept 54, 55, something like that, 54.
Yeah, but realize this is something that happens in the books, right? So it's still something abstract, and it's not the exact number that's in the bank, but that's what counts in the books.
That's what's leading in principle when you look at the annual report.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So in the annual report, when it's about the profit and the losses and the revenue, and these are the numbers that being used.
It's like the tax authority taking that chunk out of those.
Exactly. Yeah, and something that you see often, right? So that people take the numbers from Transfermarkt, and stuff like that, and but in the books it's not the same.
It's different.
It's very different. But maybe one more quick example, because if you look at the transfer of Timber this year, because he came from Ajax, there's a lot less that goes off the transfer fee, right? So it's a little bit of solidarity, because he started when he was 12 or 13 at Feyenoord. So there was 150,000 euros that went to Feyenoord. And then there are some intermediaries, and there's probably a little bit less than with Antony. So something like 6 million. So that could be somewhere around 34 million that's left. So you can see that there's a lot of benefit in
youth products.
Youth products, exactly. Yeah. So percentage-wise, there's a lot more or less left over from a transfer like Timber than something like Antony.
I have a question about the intermediaries, right? Why are they so expensive? Why are they millions to be in between a transfer, to negotiate a transfer? I know this has been a debate as well, and maybe this is a little bit outside of scope because you're much more focused on the finance side of things, but maybe your opinion about this. I know that there's also maybe, the UEFA or the FIFA are looking into that to cap maybe cap
the intermediaries.
Exactly. So the fee, basically. Yeah. So what's your view on this?
Well, from a personal perspective, it's ridiculous, right? It's all of the money is ridiculous, of course, buying a player for 95, but then if you're his agent and then you get like 10 million, and we know the stories from Mino Raiola, right, with the transfers of De Ligt and Pogba, I'm scratching my head as well. I mean, how can you sign off as a club for so much for someone like that? But yeah, I think there's a lot of power with a lot of intermediaries. Yeah, I think they use it really wisely. I guess they're
Lobbyist.
lobbyists.
Just lobbyists.
Yeah, right. And if players are popular, it's a game, right? And the game, there is money, a lot of money, and that's being used. Yeah, but about that cap, I think it's already a rule for this season that the intermediaries can have a maximum of 10% now. From the transfer fee, and there was also something about that players or intermediaries got a percentage of the salary from the player as well, and that's capped now at 3%. So if it wasn't enough that they got a percentage of the transfer, some of the intermediaries
passive income
from the salary. Yeah, crazy.
I have another question, right? Still on this subject specifically about Timber, right? There were rumors. I don't know if it's true or not, or maybe you could depict this from the financials, the latest results. But we know all about last year. He was contemplating whether he would go to Manchester United, yes or no. And then at the end, he made the decision to stay, but he did renew his contract.
Yeah.
And not only that, there were talks. I'm not sure. I didn't verify it, or I don't know if it's real, yes or no. But he got like a loyalty bonus as well. Do you know anything about that?
Well, if you look at the numbers from Ajax that they publish, they don't go into individual transfers. So you don't see that number. You can't really find that number in there. But, and maybe some of the viewers have seen that I published the amortization of Ajax in a very big table. And so if you calculated based on the transfer fees and the contracts that are published, you get quite a big difference between the total that you actually calculate and what's reported. And that's probably because of those kind of fees, because the amortization goes for the complete sum that is paid for the player, so including these kind of loyalty bonuses and stuff like that.
Yeah. So how would it work, Jose? How would it work? Like in this case, let's give an example. Like Timber, right?
Yep.
Sabi, correct me if I'm wrong. He signed 1 more year. So how would it work in terms of? So he renews his contract.
Yep.
Probably a new contract, right?
Yeah.
He could be upgraded also in terms of salary or these kind of things.
Yep.
What does it happen? What does happen to the books of Ajax in this specific case? And also, I want to touch also after this on the valuation of players. Is there a connection? Because valuation of players is very, very interesting. It's a market value, and the market value has a couple of factors. Finance is one of them, but not the only one. So I want your opinion on that as well, if that's okay.
Yeah. Well, first of all, because they never paid a transfer fee for Timber, he's not in the books in the sense that there's amortization, because they paid 0 divided by whatever years, so that would be 0. Yeah. But when he renews his contract, there is an amount paid. There were several million, I guess. Were the rumors. I'm not quite sure if that is written off in one go for that year, or that it's also spread out. I think the second, that's probably also spread out over the remaining years.
So it was 2 years then. 2 years.
Yeah. So 2 years.
Yeah.
Or if you get an example of someone which you did pay a fee for. So let's say again, maybe let's take Tadic, for example. He came for 13.7, I guess, and he signed quite a long contract. I think 5 years plus 2 or something. So that's first is divided by 5, and after 2 or 3 years he renewed, and then you get the remaining amortization, and you divide it again by the new length of the contract. So then the value per year goes down. Yeah. And that's something that's, that can be interesting. Maybe another example at this point, and a hotly debated player, the Klaassen. He's this year, this season, his amortization is 2.9 million, almost 3 million. So it's quite high. It's quite a lot. But he only has 1 year remaining after this. So let's say they. This is the last season.
Year.
Last year. So let's say they renew his contract with another year. then that amortization would be halved, right? Because instead of over 1 year, the last remaining 3 million gets over 2 years. So that would have a positive effect on the amortization. If you want him for another year, that's not a question. But that could be something where you can create some room to buy new players.
Sabi, go ahead. I have so many questions still on this topic. I have 3 actually, but go ahead.
No, but I think it's maybe wise to go to deep dive a bit more on Ajax.
I know, but I still have.
Go ahead. If you have this question, ask us so we can close this part.
Once we close this, I will give it to you for the Ajax part. You can take over a little bit. I have a very stupid question. Maybe it's legally bound or binding. I'm sorry, I'm not sure about that, but I just have a question. You see, like always, almost 99% of the cases or 95% of the cases, the contracts go max 5 years. But if you're talking about amortization, doesn't it make much more sense to sign an even longer contract? Is it something stupid I'm saying right now? Is it not possible? Or because I think Chelsea did this, right?
Exactly.
With one of the players or 2 players even. Yeah.
No, you're right. And there's now a new rule from FIFA that it's a max of 5 years. So to counter this trick of giving players a super long contract and sort of downplaying the costs that you have for those players, there's also a downside, of course, because if they have a long contract, it's more expensive for them to go. But that would be a sort of a trick, so to say. But that's been stopped. So it's a maximum of 5, and you see most players that are especially at Ajax that are signed get a 5-year deal. That's because of this.
Another question, right? So what happens when you're talking about Klaassen, right? You gave the example about Klaassen. It would be like in your example, if you amortize and you give him an extension, it will be positive effect on the books. But budget-wise, he would want at least the same salary, maybe a bump up on his salary. So this affects the budget, right? Or the cash flow? I don't know. You have to tell us a little bit about that.
Cash flow is another thing, of course, because this is we're really talking about what's in the books, and of course the actual amount that they have in hand or they can pay, but that's much more complex and even less transparent. Also because players are being paid and bought in periods over time, in several instances, stuff like that. So that's even harder. But there are consequences. They are all interconnected, all of those things. So maybe getting a little bit ahead to Ajax. Ajax tries to, as a guideline, have a maximum of 60 million on total amortization. That's something they try to steer on. So if you want to create some room there, you can extend, for example, Klaassen, and you get a 1.5 million extra room. So if you buy a player for 7.5 and give him a 5-year contract,
that's the 1.5.
That's the 1.5. But you're right, the salary goes up because you have an extra player, and that's probably get a little bit more salary. And you still have to, on some level, compensate for the amortization in a way, because that's an expense, and you need some income to counter that.
Thanks. When they talk about, because we'll come to that in a bit about Ajax specifically, but we know for a fact that Ajax has been budgeted on European Champions League level in recent years. When they say that, is that the 60 million you're touching upon, or is it something else?
Yeah, that's part of it. Also salary that goes up, and they sort of, you have something like operational result. That's sort of like the more predictable structural costs and income that you have. So that excludes the income from Europe, from the performances from UEFA, the fees, and the transfers. Yeah. And Ajax runs at a loss. So if they don't sell any players, and if they don't get any income from European tournaments, they'll have a loss, and quite a big loss. So the Champions League budget that they're working with is saying, all right, we're gonna assume that every year we get we reach Champions League, and you get a start fee, right? And that's something around 30 or 40 million is almost guaranteed. So Ajax starts always at a loss of that minus 40 operationally.
There was actually, by the way, for our viewers, we're recording this on a Saturday. We just saw the game of Augsburg Ajax. We saw a lot of reactions from Stijn and the players, and also there was a VE Pro, which is a very like a football magazine in the Netherlands, a big one. And the Ajax Watcher wrote an article actually, and there was a very specific something there. And I just want to ask you if you think that's more or less true, if you can validate it a little bit from your own experience. It said basically, and Overmars actually said this as well, I believe, Sahbi, a few years ago. So they bumped up their budget and they went to, taking the risk to benchmark everything to the Champions League, like we talked about. They said basically that if we play Champions League, we have to sell 50 million. So Champions League, we're guaranteed to play it. We're at a loss of 50 million, which we have to compensate with a transfer at the end of the summer. If we don't play, that's what the VE article said, like this season we go in Europa League, hopefully. We still have to play the qualifying. That will mean it's double the amount, so 100 million. Is it that like severe, basically? Because that's a really big amount.
Yeah, and I don't think that's far off, because that it's guaranteed. If Ajax qualified for Champions League, they would have got guaranteed like something like 40 million, maybe even 50 million. And for Europa League, that's a lot less. I think that's maybe not even 10 guaranteed. So that's a really big difference. And then as well, I think this is also the part, transfer result. So selling actual fees of 100 million is a transfer result of a little bit less than that, maybe 70 or something like that. So I think that's in there as well. But yeah, that is the reality. Yeah.
Isn't it odd? Sorry, Juan. Isn't it
no,
odd
go
that
ahead.
that you qualify for Champions League? You get a guaranteed fee, but still you need to pay 50 million, or you need to sell for 50 million. I mean, where does that 50 million exactly come from? I mean, you get 50 million or 40 million from the Champions League, but still you have to sell. So basically,
but Sahbi, it's even worse. The main message right now from José is that 50 million is not the fee that we have to get. That's the transfer result that we have to get, basically. So we have to sell even more, right?
Yeah.
Take out the cost, indeed.
Yeah, and I think one thing we haven't mentioned yet, which is a big factor in this, is of course the TV rights. And I think we all know that Dutch TV rights don't pay out that much. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that I could have said that as well. And so that's a big difference for Premier League clubs or Bundesliga clubs or whatever. So they have an operational income which is higher. So imagine that Ajax would be sort of more comparable to those clubs. They would get maybe 30-40 million more in TV right money, and then you kind of that's where the difference is. But that's what Ajax trying to do.
But this also means that we've been taking a risk consciously on European tournaments, because that amount that we get is like basically much higher than the TV rights that we get from the competition, from the league. Yep. Right? Because also in terms of TV rights, just to be clear also for our viewers, if we play Champions League, we also get TV rights, but we're talking right now about the league, Eredivisie. So I had one question before, Sabi, you can go after with the Ajax question. Just coming back to, I want to ask you, because we had a recent situation with Tadic, and there are rumors maybe about Klaassen as well. I want to know what effect some like a player when we terminate his contract. What happens with the remainder of his contract? Does a club has to pay the remainder to them of what's owed to them, basically? That's my question.
I think those are probably specific agreements on
place,
that,
or clauses in the contract, or
something like that. And it was quite remarkable. I think that they ended the contract of Tadic, because they will probably have a small loss transfer result wise from his transfer. Because he was still in the books for 1.7 million, something like that. And then you would almost think, well, I mean, the new club could have paid like 2 million for him, right? That wouldn't be strange. But they kind of took the loss for some reason. Don't exactly know why, but probably because
the status.
That's probably the romantic answer, and maybe the financial answer would be that the new club, if they don't have to pay Ajax, they can pay the agent or Tadic a little bit more. So probably that's something that they negotiated, and something like that. Yeah.
Let's go to the part which I think our viewers are really interested upon. It's about our own current situation. What is our situation? How are things looking right now in terms of? There are fans who are expecting fireworks. Things like huge transfers. Although they knew, based on the interview from Mislintat, that they first need to sell and then they can buy. But now fans are already like anticipating, because Bassey got sold, at least recently, but you got Timber that got sold, and still nothing happens. Is it really, should we worry because this financial situation is more worse than we thought? Or is this more of a decision made by Ajax, although there are sufficient funds available?
I think there's a lot to unpack there. Maybe let's start with the fact, I guess, that Ajax is not really deviating their course in a way, right? They like we discussed, it's quite a risky course that they're doing with that operational loss and counting on the sales and the European income. But it doesn't look like they really want to go back. So I don't think they're going to lower the amortization total. I don't think they're really lowering their salary cap that much. And they've always needed to sell players every year. And maybe sometimes it was waiting for players to sell and then buying, but that's tricky always. Are you gonna buy a new player when you haven't sold one yet? What if they get injured? What if they don't leave? Well, so that's and that's, I think, a second important thing to realize. It's policy that they're doing there, and you see that in all the interviews. They make the directors and on high level at Ajax, they're making financial policy, right? And that's based on risks, that's based on choices. So it's not like, yes, there's money, or no, there's no money. Yes, there is always money, but how much money is there? How much money do you want to spend? On who do you want to spend it? And if you know on who you want to spend it on, that's Mislintat's thing. Then the question is, does the player and the club want to come, right? So it's a really complex game. And I think, they needed to sell at least a little bit in the beginning, so the loss wouldn't be that bad. And that's something they agreed with each other. And then they went on the market. But I think now the problem more is, do players want to come? No Champions League to be played, and so it can be a little bit of a tricky situation. So that's something to take into account. And then about the current status, I guess I get the feeling in the more interviews that are being published and the more you hear about it, that last year was quite a wild year probably. So I think, and we get the official numbers only in the autumn, like September, October, I think they pushed the amortization quite high with all the new players. I think maybe they paid a lot to the intermediaries. We know the story of intermediaries in the last transfer window. So maybe the amortization was still a little bit higher than they wanted. And maybe they paid a lot of salary as well.
But José, just quickly on that, right? So your best guess, that's basically what you're saying, is that probably last year we went a bit higher on that 60 million, basically magic number that you mentioned. That's your feeling. But how is that possible? Because you also just touched upon 1 minute before on that we have a board, we have a CFO, Susan. They look at the financial risk of things. So we always assess the financial risk appetite of a transfer, of a player, of these kind of things. So how is it possible that we went overboard? Was it panic station settings, or what was it? In your best guess, it's a difficult question, but why do you think?
I think it's difficult to say. If I may, everything went berserker. When Overmars left, Overmars took over. He took decisions. I think it was a disaster. It was chaos on management level, and I think decisions weren't made by the right people. That's what I think. Hence the reason why things got splashed, and Schreuder got his agent taking over and doing the ridiculous transfers, which was agreed upon or confirmed by Van der Sar with his signature. I think it was chaos, and maybe management is responsible for this, in my view. But maybe I don't know whether
It
José
could
has
be.
a
Look,
different.
I'm not trying. Just to be clear to our viewers, I'm not blaming Susan. Maybe Susan was opposed to it from
Yes, you
her
do.
perspective. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. But maybe she was opposed to it from her perspective. But maybe she got overruled because maybe from a technical side, let's say Van der Sar was agreeing to it. Again, I'm not blaming Van der Sar. Just to be clear on that
Yeah.
as well. But hypothetically, it could be the case that the financial person is saying no. The technical people are saying yes. And then at the end of the day, we know that everything above 1 million has to be given a green light by the board, right? So the board has final say. Correct, right?
Yeah, true. Yeah, and somewhere in that, and again, we don't know exactly what the numbers are, but all of the signs that we get now is that sort of, I think they went a little bit overboard, and maybe they thought, there's a lot of money coming in. And because the strange thing will be, and we saw that in the half year numbers in January, that was the plus was already 70 million on profit, and they're probably going to end up a little bit lower at the end of the year. But I guess it still could easily be a 50 million profit of last year. So it's really hard to comprehend for us to think, hey, but why was there too much money spent last year? They made a profit of 50 million. So maybe that's something that played a part as well.
Probably what you said before also, it has to do with the fact that we're not playing Champions League. So they're looking ahead. They don't want to run into, problems later on, I think.
Yeah. And I think it's, so I think a lot of the remarks that you see is, hey, they've made a lot of profit last year or the year before, whatever, a lot of sales. Why don't we spend that now on players?
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to realize that if you get money, if you earn money from transfers, you get money in, that's more of a one-time thing, at least in the books, that only accounts for the result in that year that you earn that money. But if you buy players, that's a much more structural expense. So if you up the amortization because you've bought a couple of players, then you have that extra couple of million that you have to pay for a couple of years, maybe even 5 years, and that profit only goes for the 1 year that you made the sale, and in the other years that means that you have to sell extra or earn extra to compensate for the higher amortization and the higher salary probably because you paid. You bought more expensive players. So there's a structural problem, and then that 50 million in the plus, if you spread that out over multiple years, and it can vanish quite quickly.
Yeah. So it serves also as a buffer. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, it serves as a buffer, and maybe they'll bump it up a little bit because the new Champions League setup will have more earnings. And looking at the position that the Netherlands is in, and that they have more teams that go into the Champions League from next season on, maybe they'll decide to up it a little bit. But it's not like you can say we had a profit last year of 50 million. Let's buy a player.
We still have to qualify, José.
Exactly, but that's
going to be a problem.
This is the double-edged sword, right, José? Because actually, last time I was on the channel together with Sahbi was arguing, and I think Papimento's also on your side, like, what is first, right? So if we don't spend, we run the risk that we don't qualify for the Champions League. We don't have enough quality to end up there, and then you're actually missing out more Champions League revenues, and then you'll be even further from home, like they say in Dutch. So it will be even a more dire situation financially in the years to come. Where do you stand on this, José, personally?
Yeah, I think again, yes, maybe try to spend a little bit and don't hold back too much, but yeah, be really careful because there are going to be structural costs, and there are so many implications on that because not only do you have higher salary, higher amortization, you'll have more expensive players that if you sell them, you'll get less profit from them. There's maybe even a problem that you get in the way of youth players, and not only are they core to what Ajax is, having youth players be really successful, they also you earn much more money. So there's a sort of a domino effect if you go towards being a club that only buys players,
True.
Yeah.
Can I ask you something? You gave an example about the youth, right? You have to be careful because also youth. I think one of the most recent examples is like Hato, right? That came up the ranks. We bought Bassey last year. I don't know how long, for 4 or 5 years. I don't know for sure. But I'm talking about transfer results in that case with the amortization. We bought him for 23, I think. So what would be the transfer result? Your best guess on Bassey? We don't get a lot, right, out of that. I suppose.
No, and I think looking at the numbers there, I tweeted at something about that yesterday, because in the end it was a little bit higher. The first was talk about 21 million, and that was 22.5.
Yeah.
And if you calculate that with the solidarity and amortization that's left, and sort of like a 15% other expenses, you almost get break even, maybe 200,000-300,000 in the minus or something, but probably break even. So it almost feels like it's a number, to make it
So this is like, if there's one thing people should take away, it's this, right? So people think, hey, we got 22.5 to spend now. Exactly. That's it. I have one more question.
I'll do
Go
one
ahead.
add to that, because he was quite a big part of the amortization. So no, you didn't get any transfer result from him, but yes, there's almost 5 million lower on the amortization total. So
per
it's,
year.
So
I had one more question, also a general question. This is something that I saw on Twitter a few weeks ago, and it didn't make sense to me, but maybe I'm wrong. So I want to have it clarified. We have the book balances, like the financial reporting is also from mid-year to mid-year, right? End of year.
Yep.
So some fans were arguing like, but Ajax will not sign a player until after that 1st of July, I think it was, or 1st of June.
After
I don't know which one it is.
30th of June. After 30th of June.
Exactly. But for me, I don't think that's true, because you can always find an agreement with the player and you can put in the contract what day this starts, right? Or am I wrong on this?
Well, the books go from July 1st to July 1st, or to June 30th of the year, and that plays a role. And because Ajax is publicly traded, they have to do official announcements. So you will see that they have in their announcements the official day that a player starts, and it's a lot of times it's July 1st. If before that you get
but you can still do the deal beforehand. That's my question.
Yeah, right? But exactly, you can. And I think sometimes deals can be brought into the year before, just to embellish the numbers a little bit. I think Gravenberg was a good example. He transferred on June 30th last year, so that's to compensate that financial year a little bit. Yeah.
Did we get something for Gravenberg? I don't remember.
18 and a half.
Oh, he had 1 year, right? He had 1 year.
You got a good amount indeed.
Yeah, I think something like 18 and a half you got from him.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, man. I had so many financial questions. Sorry, man. Go ahead.
No, I mean, it's quite interesting and clear to hear from José about spending a bit more. So he's a little bit on my camp, so to say. But my question would be at this moment, also for the fans, do you think, from your perspective, can we expect something upcoming days? Not in terms of players. I mean, if there's a specific interest in a player, is there something available at this moment, or based on calculations, or is it still zero and we have to wait for Alvarez and Kudus to be sold?
If there is room to spend, right? That's the question. I think there is, and I think that's also something good to realize. They're talking about like 10 million for Sperzian, or something close to 20 million for Sutalo. Those are big numbers, right? I mean, even everyone's saying, they have to spend more, and it looks like they're trying to do that, but they're not getting it yet. But I think they're working with something, a budget like that, and they're also talking about even more players. So it looks like they think there is some room, but one thing that is important to remember is that if you look at the amortization and now the transfer result at this moment, I think the amortization is at this point a bit not at the maximum, but if you take into account that 10 and the 20 million for those players, then you're probably somewhere around the max again. But on the so if you want more than that, you'll need to sell more players than that, probably make more room. And if you look at what's the transfer result at this point, it's something around 35. It's only Timber, but you need, like they said, you need a little bit more than that, and quite some more that. So the sale of Kudus or Alvarez kind of feels almost necessary. Maybe they can keep one, but these players are really probably good value at this point. They kind of want to go as well. You want to keep them, but so that's probably the discussions in the boardroom or in the between Susan and Sven, right? That this is the time to earn a lot for them, and you need a little bit more. Yeah, you can also sell someone like Daramy or Klaassen, but you get a little bit less for them, so that won't compensate probably for it. Yeah, so it's a really tricky balance. I think that's the main thing, and people have to realize that it's a tricky balance. You want to keep them, but yeah, they can have a little loss. Ajax, they can take that. There's a buffer, but yeah.
If you would sell Daramy, right? I'm just thinking the whole time like how you're instructing us to think right now. I will never watch transfers or see the transfers again like I used to. Like this changed a little bit my perspective, but no, seriously. But Daramy, if we sell Daramy, probably the financial impact will be less than if we sell like, for instance, Edson, right? Or Kudus.
Yeah, there are talks of like 40 or 50 million for Kudus or Alvarez. There'll probably be something around 30 million on a transfer result from those. If you in that region, maybe a little bit less or maybe a little bit more. So that would be great numbers. But Daramy, his amortization is like 2.4 million at this point, and he has 2 or 3 years contract. Yeah, and you'll probably sell him for what, maybe 10.
No, not even, I think.
Maybe not even. So you won't. Yeah. So he'll have quite some room. He'll make some room on the amortization side, but transfer result maybe a little bit less. Yeah, those are the choices that they're trying to make. It's interesting. And then again, there's another winter transfer window as well where they can earn money. There's even the end of next year where something can happen. So the year financially is also really long still. So not everything will be decided now.
Go ahead, Sabi, if you want to say.
No, I don't have any specific question. Just trying to think out loud. To summarize, so Alvarez and Kudus, most likely it will be necessary to sell them to budget-wise, but also to keep your amortization, to lower your amortization. That's, by the way, the keyword of this podcast: amortization. Yeah, remember that word. Okay, but so to make sure that we don't create any expectation for the viewers, for the fans, we won't keep both of them because the chances are very small that we will be financially strong to remain strong. So okay, and you want to say? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm really curious to see what happens there. I mean, also from personal perspective, it would be fantastic if you can keep those two, right? They are by far the best players, and maybe you can find a way by selling some other players and maybe taking a little loss in that sense.
It feels like almost a rebuild a little bit, and I will tell you why. I'm thinking about what we were saying and everything, and then I will touch upon one of the interviews that Stijn gave, and he said very interestingly, they want the number one targets. Probably the number one targets are of that quality. We don't know for sure, but let's assume they're quality players. They're not cheap players. They're expensive players for our standards, so it will cost something. If they manage to go there, so that's their main strategy, it seems like they made a decision that they rather buy only a few players, but there are quality injections directly to the squad, but there will be more players leaving us. So the rest has to be basically are kept the same way, or we have to trust the youth, some of the youth players to fill in the gaps this season. That's a bit like between the lines how I'm reading everything right now, including this podcast and also the interviews that I'm reading from like the articles and everything. So that for me is basically what I'm expecting now going forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think Stein said something like that, and I think it was also in the context of Tadic leaving, saying the old leaders should go or something like that.
Yeah.
So and I think that this is all, Overmars did fantastic things, but it was all about him, and all of his contacts, and now he's gone, and there was a big black hole, and it was a little bit chaos last year, and maybe now they're trying to build also sort of financially and from that perspective.
It almost sounds like also that Sven, I get a sense sometimes that he didn't know what he got himself into a little bit when he signed, because he also said, I believe, like, I thought we would qualify for the Champions League. I felt bad for him when I read that, basically. But
yeah. I mean, it's part of his job. I think he can only be a winner in this because everybody already knows the current situation. If he does bad, if Ajax does bad, it's not because of him. So he can only win from here. But for me, I got one last question before we can end up the session. Overmars, in your view, did he do a great job financially from finance perspective?
All right. Yeah. I was kind of hesitant because, sometimes I have the feeling, he left a little bit of a mess, right? He did everything on his phone, and he didn't, and no one knew exactly what he was doing. And so when he was gone so suddenly, I think he really left some chaos there. So so that's a bit bad. But on the other hand, Ajax grew, and had great performances, and also financially, they had that risky policy, but they performed, they earned a hell of a lot of money. So I think financially they did great as well, and maybe also on the commercial side, right? So Manu Gele did some fantastic work, and I think where Overmars was more about the transfers, he was about the commercial side, and if he does well, salary can increase, right? If he gets a lot of income on the commercial side, you can increase the salary. So that's his thing as well. So Overmars, well, I think good, but sudden leaving is probably leaving a bit of a gap. Yeah.
By the way, just to be if usually I host, I don't give my opinions on this channel, but I don't agree with that whole stigma of Overmars left a mess, because we're talking right now what José is saying. It's operational risk, right? So the way he was operating, there was no continuity. Nobody knew what he was doing. There was no process, check and balances in place. Nobody could trace back what he did. But this is an operational issue. And of course, Overmars could have done it differently. But if he's doing that and nobody pays attention to him because he's doing such a great job, this is something that the people around him, our supervisory board, for instance, they should audit this. They should have known, if Overmars leaves or something happens, we have a problem. But we found out after. So, yes, Overmars had his own ways. I agree. But if you work in an organization, you have to fit in the organization. But people should tell you also, you cannot work that way. You have to comply with certain way of working. And this is something I didn't do.
No, true. And if you look at the numbers, without having the context or the information on his background, he did well. Is that
absolutely? I think. Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I think, what José said as well, he did such a good job. But don't forget, when he came, we were in a mess financially as well.
Huge mess.
Yeah, so he carried us a little bit as well as a technical director. And I think the trust grew within the organization so much that they left him alone. They said, he works like magic, basically. Let's leave him what he does best. Yeah. But that's wrong from Ajax, in my opinion, not wrong from Overmars.
True.
Yeah, that's I can understand what you're saying, and maybe if you put that into perspective, that it's a company that has 50 million revenue, and still those things at the top aren't really in order. That's also a little bit, that's football, right?
You already said at the beginning of the podcast, football business is a special business, right? That's what you said. So,
exactly.
José, listen. It was supposed to be half an hour.
A bit over that, right?
But no, it was very interesting to have you on. I think we will do it again. once the timing is right, maybe half a year from now, a year from now, it will be nice to have you on a regular and just check the balances and see how things are evolving. So thank you so much for being on the channel, and also for our viewers. If you're on Twitter, follow him on Twitter. We'll put the link in the description below. You tweet only in Dutch, right? Just for our viewers?
I tweet only in Dutch. Yeah,
okay, but they can use it translate.
You can
lot of
translate.
numbers.
Yeah,
Numbers
I don't
are
know. But wait,
universal,
did Musk still leave that, or do we have to pay for that as well nowadays?
I don't
Sorry,
know.
man. I had
Give
to
it
throw
some
this
time.
one-
Give it some
I
time.
had to throw it out. I had to throw it out. José, thank you so much. Sahbi, thank you as well.
Thanks, bro.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.